Hey, and welcome back everyone to another video. In this video, we're going to look at Enscape 3.1. And why am I excited about 3.1? Well, it's because we have a little more functionality out of Enscape, and that includes the material library. Ooh, every time I think of material library, I think of, this expansive list of materials that I can just do whatever I want with. And we're starting to see that in Enscape. So before we get into it, if at any point you happen to learn something, which you obviously will, Enscape 3.1 just came out, then please demolish that like button. It tells me that you learned something, that you might have liked the video. Okay, getting into it now. The best thing that we're seeing in Enscape 3.1 is of course, it's the Enscape material library, and you can find that in the Enscape tab, of course. And we have a couple of new tabs here. Now, I do want to preface this by saying I'm just focusing on Revit. This is not necessarily something that is completely and utterly new in other forms of Enscape, be it in Rhino, SketchUp primarily, but in Revit, this is a big deal. It's more of a bigger deal. So we're used to seeing the asset library, but we have not yet seen the Enscape material library. So when I click on this, we are instantly presented with a beautiful set of materials. And by that, I mean, we have a ton of materials, over 240, there's 244 in total. And it's a bunch of materials that are already made for us, beautiful. And that's not just a flat image. They are full PBR materials, physically based render materials. And it's a great way to use, it's great to have these materials, but not only that, but they're great starting materials in that you can start with them, you can edit them as you need to, but from there, you can make them what you want. But nonetheless, this is a great place to start. So, okay, all right. Well, we have this, so what do we do at this point? Well, me being someone who doesn't use Enscape as much as I used to, if I'm just being honest here, this is a nice change, and that maybe I will use this a bit more, but I can see that right here I have the option of starring these, so like I can sort them by favorites, and that's cool. I can search, all that's nice. But what happens when I decide, well, I really want to use one? What do I do? Well, I am in a model which it's fully materialized, but there's no asset, like material assets applied to them. So in a sense, it's not really materialized. It just has a bunch of gray materials. But for the sake of this, it is, which is going to be really helpful, because I have all these materials that are ready made for me that I can begin to start applying to my project. So not only am I going to show you the new features of Enscape, but we're going to see what it's like to apply these materials in Revit and then see them in Enscape. So, this is a competition. So of course we want to use like this worn brick. So let's take this, and I select this. I have really no options here. I can't click and drag. There's none of that. I can right click and select all, which no. Or I can select one, which, I decide I want this one. Well, my only option is to close the window or to import the selection. So I obviously want to import that. And so what is that going to do? Well, my first thought, or hope nonetheless, was to be able to drag this onto my Revit model. Even if not dragging it onto it, to like specifically where I want it to go, just dragging it in, like, okay, put it in the model. And you've seen that. You can take any Revit family, just drag it into Revit, and it will load and blah, blah. But this is a bit different because we have to import it, and which is what we've just done. Now, my first thought is, whenever I was first using this, what now? What am I supposed to do? Well, there's only one place I can find materials, and that is, the Revit material library. So that was my thought, in that, okay, it's probably going to end up within the Revit material library. And sure enough, that's where it did end up. So let's go ahead and close this. And I can go over here to manage and then materials. And it was called like brick 08, something like that. So we can search that, at least as a start. And then from there, we can then go into starting to apply that. And so that's what we're going to do. So here I am within the Revit material library. And if I just search brick, we'll obviously see what's brick within this project. And so there it is. That's actually the only brick. So there's brick 08 worn. And if I look at here, there's no graphics information, but what we care about is the appearance tab, which is absolutely great. This is everything that I want. This is everything that I care about. I'm seeing everything that I want. And the great thing about this is that it is a PBR material, essentially. The only problem I have with this is that you see this orange icon, orange triangle here, this is indicating that it's a legacy material within Revit. And that means that it's not fully PBR, it's not physically based. Now, I will say it's beginning to get there because I at least have a bump map. I at least have more than just a basic map, in that it does have a roughness map. Now, the interesting part about all of this is that it is using that legacy material, which means it can't fully utilize the difference between a legacy material and the physically based material that Revit shipped with starting in Revit 2020. Now, I would encourage you to look at a previous video of mine, which I have compared the two. So it's kind of too bad, but nonetheless, this is great because here I do have my bump map, which is actually functioning as a normal map and is called a displacement map. It's a in that regard, it's quite confusing. If you're familiar with materials at all, this is a normal map and they're calling it a displacement map. Not a big deal. It is functioning the same. And to my knowledge, I guess legacy materials within Revit can function with these normal map materials. I wasn't aware of that because I thought this was only built on in Revit 2020 for those new physically based materials. But nonetheless, we have everything here for a physically based material. So if we really felt the need and wanted to remove that legacy icon, we could start with a generic material and import these in. But that's okay. So basically, what are we going to do here? Well, I know this is brick 08, worn. But what I want to come over here and do is, let's say we want this wall. And, I have this wall. It's a site wall. I've used it with multiple places. Well, here it is. The material is site wall. I can come into this material. I can go to my appearance, which again has nothing. It's just generic. But I want to replace that with the brick that we just added. So I'm in my asset browser and I can type in brick here. Now I'm sure I'll get a lot more options for brick because I'm looking at the appearances as opposed to just the materials in my Revit project. So once this finally does load, I'm hoping to be able to find that brick 08 worn, so I can literally just import that into my material itself, and then from there have that applied everywhere that I have this site wall material already applied, which is kind of the point here. I'm basically saying I've gone to the trouble of materializing my project, and now I just want to add materials from Enscape now. And sure enough, if I search brick within my document assets, I can see there it is. And so I just want to replace this. And once I do that, that will begin to populate within the appearance of this particular site wall material. And at that point, we're golden. We have literally taken a material from Enscape, the Enscape material library, and then imported it into our Revit project, and then replaced an already applied material with that appearance asset, basically what we really care about. And so there it is. So all I need to do is click OK, and then I'll click OK here. And so that material will then be applied to this wall, and we'll see the Revit or the Enscape update go. And we actually want to go to Enscape at this point and see what this looks like. And look, there it is. So I can't say that it necessarily looks beautiful yet, probably because I need to change the scale, make that scale look good, because it is a bit tiled. But really, nonetheless, looking up close, that's good. That's what I want. So these are pretty high quality materials. I mean, obviously we know that they are because the fact that they are those physically based materials, I've said that before, they're good looking materials, and that's exactly what we want. We're excited to see that. Now, not only do we have the option of using the materials that are already applied from Enscape now, but we have this specific Enscape material editor, which, again, if you've used the material editor in SketchUp or Rhino, whatever, those other programs had this because Enscape was using more of Revit's material library and material structure when it came to rendering an Enscape model from Revit. But now that we have this Enscape material editor built in, we can tweak those materials. I would say similarly, we could do the same thing in Revit that we could do in this material editor, but it's going to make things a lot easier. And so let me show you what some of these are. Well, I'm immediately prompted to select a material, and what I'm seeing is literally all the materials that are in my project, which is really, this is nice. This is helpful. And so some of the icons here are a bit confusing. I have a bunch of colors here, and then as I come down here, I have some different icons, like these are light bulbs and grass. And so the colors are actually related directly to the albedo color. And albedo is just like the color map. So if there's no texture applied, the color I'll see is that specific color. If you have an image applied, this won't matter at all. So in a way, you could kind of use this as organizing over here at the left, but that's kind of all it is. So really nothing in particular. But what I do want to look at is brick, like the brick material that I just imported, which is this brick right here. And so I just imported this. And so, like I said, maybe we want to, change this to a normal map. Well, this is in fact a normal map. I think it would perform better as a normal map, so I can do that. I can change the intensity. Maybe I want this to be 120%. I can increase the reflections. I can make this metallic. I can add a transparency if I want to have cut holes through it. I can do all types of things like that. And you can see up here that my type is generic. And there's a nice description of all of them. And so obviously generic is, the general purpose. But then I have, if you're familiar with all the other types of, let's say, quote, Enscape materials, this is where the different types would apply. And so I can change this to a grass, a self-illuminated, blah, blah, all these different types of things. And so then that icon at the left will be updated, and it won't just be that single circle. I'll have these different icons that are associated to that, but that means it will literally perform differently. So if I go ahead and click grass here, well, then it suddenly turns into grass. Now, I'm curious what would happen if I then leave this as grass and I come back to Enscape. I'm very curious. And so I do get a little more like undulation. So it's, in a sense, it's trying to be grass, I guess. Once this uploads and updates, we'll get like the true result, because that's going to be quite interesting if it does render as grass but show as the material. And sure enough, that's it. We're seeing it. So basically it has some extra undulation. So it's kind of up to you and how you categorize it. It's going to function differently, of course, because it is at that point a grass. I would typically use a grass for a grass. If you're familiar with the Enscape grass, they look great. And so I'd leave the grass type for that type of material actually being a grass, but that's great. So with all of that, we basically have, what do we have here? Well, we have an Enscape library that has a bunch of materials that we can pull from immediately, apply to our project, and then when we're done with that, we can access even all the materials that are, whether they're from Enscape or not. We can just simply come in here and change them all. We can edit them all at that point, which is great. Like, these aren't, like, only one of these is from Enscape itself, and then from there we can actually still edit all of them. So I have all of these different materials, and I can begin to add maps. So like, if you really look at this, it is very similar to the way Revit presents materials. I would say this is a little more intuitive because it's specifically meant to edit the material properties, so you can see the difference and help you understand the difference and kind of how you're affecting the material. It just makes a little more sense. So like this aluminum, really, there's nothing coming out of this aluminum other than it just happens to be that color, the gray color we're already seeing. So what I could do is from here, instead of going into the Revit material, which debatably I would say this is quicker, I could come in here and then quickly add a material map. And then suddenly I'm there. I'm good to go. And then I can affect the image phase. So it is accessing all the materials within Revit. And so as I change things here, it will change it within my Revit material library. But honestly, I like this more because it's a bit easier to use. It's more intuitive, like I said. You can search pretty easily. If we look at some of the different options we have here, we have obviously materials. But what I can do is actually import materials. So like I can save these materials, much like you can profiles for Enscape render settings. I can import an entire Enscape library. So if I have a bunch of different materials. So if I click on this gear, I can see imported texture path, which is very interesting and leads me to some certain thoughts. And it says all textures imported via the material library or a material package. Again, that file, that material package file, will be stored within the folder shown below. And so that means if I click on this folder, if we look at it, it happens to be within, it's in my user folder. So the nice thing is that you can relocate that, which means you could technically at a firm work off like a server. And so maybe you have a bunch of materials that you end up saving there. That's kind of cool. You can all access them. Not bad. It's a bit overwhelming, but you could do that. And so I think more of the path that I personally would go down is, let's say, we like this brick. We've already imported it. We like it a lot. So here's this brick. And I'm going to go ahead and change that back to generic. What I can do is I can actually export this material package. And so let's say I've made some changes to this, which I have made some changes. I've made it a normal map. I've upped the height, all that kind of stuff. I can literally export this material, which I'll do in just a second. And once I export that, that means I can technically open that within any. So I'll just save this and see it's a .material package file. I can literally save that, which is fantastic. And I can open up a different project in Revit, launch this material library, and then suddenly I can say, you know what? I want to either batch import, which would allow me to select multiple files, or I can come over here to really any material and I can click import material package. And then suddenly I'm prompted with importing this material package, which is exactly what I want. So basically that's a good way of saying, well, I really love this material. I made this material. It's beautiful. I'll save this out and just do a folder. And so when I get to another project, maybe I want to use this. Maybe I want to start with this. It's a great way of building a personal library, I would say. Now, you can use it for a firm. You can build it as a firm if you want. But I think in like the short term, I could see that being very useful for personal use. You can save it because you like it, you made it, it looks good, and you want to use it on another one of your projects. Cool. So we've looked at essentially all of the different types that we have here. We've got, of course, different types. We can continue to look at all of this more if we want, but at this point, we don't really need to. The last thing I want to do is search water. And so I have water here, and I want to actually basically make this water not just a generic material, but an actual Enscape water. So if I change this to water, we can see all of a sudden we have water. Here we go. And so that's great. I'm going to just close that, and we're going to go back to Enscape, and I have water applied kind of everywhere around here. And I want to see the water update, which is here, and I have all this water out here. I want to see what that looks like. And we know Enscape water looks really good, but the cool thing now is if you're used to using the older Enscape materials, you would just call it water and it would just show up as water. And there were different types of materials if you wanted different types of water. Well, you have actual settings now, looking at the Enscape material editor, of water itself, which is fantastic. Like, that's kind of the whole point of this Enscape material editor. In some cases, when it comes to Enscape materials, you have more settings that you can mess with for water in this case. So maybe you saw it before I closed out, but when we get back in here, I can see that I have more than just it's water, or it's ocean water, or it's pool water. I literally have more options with water. And so let's go back to this water, and we can see I have a bunch of different settings that I can choose to change. And so looking at this now, I can see I can even override the global wind settings. I can increase the intensity of the wind, the direction of the wind, the scale of the waves. Like, you can clearly see that we did not have these settings before when it came to water. And if we did, they were definitely not easy to find because I didn't find them. So this is really good stuff. This is what I like to see. So obviously the watercolor, that's kind of cool. You can change the watercolor to whatever you want. Interesting. So really great stuff. I like this a lot. And so my hope now is that the water will render kind of like we want, and we can take a look at it. There is some high quality Enscape water. Looks really good. And if I come up here, there's my water. Again, this looks really great. And I have actual options as far as changing this now, which is really cool. And I can do it really easily. I don't have to mess with Revit materials. Like, really, to me, being the Revit person that I am, I enjoy everything Revit. And so it's nice to be able to, change things in Revit. But if I can do that easier within an Enscape menu that's built to do that, then I'm going to do that all the time. It's going to save me so much time when editing materials, because it's literally affecting the same material in the same way in Revit, but just in an easier way. So, okay, we've looked at the Enscape material library, which is great. And it's the type of thing that's going to grow every single release. Like, every single update, it's going to have, just like the assets, we're going to see so many more materials in here that we can use as great starting materials. One thing I do want to point out is the glass materials. If you have tried to screw with glass in Enscape, you'll just know that it's difficult. And by no means is it easy to get any of these weird frosted glass or with patterns, anything. It's very difficult. So we are in a much better place in Enscape when it comes to these glass materials, because this is awesome. I don't know how this translates to Revit necessarily, but my guess is they've taken a lot of time to put these maps together and settings in a certain way to where you can get these high quality glass, really specific looking glass materials, which is really great. So if we look at some of the other things that are new within the actual Enscape 3.1, well, the big thing was the material library. Of course, we've already looked at that. It's awesome. I'm really excited for that. It's going to make working with materials in Revit less painful because really it can be painful. At the material editor, we already looked at material editor. There's a lot of different things that you can do with that. The panorama gallery is pretty cool. Like the idea of having a full gallery of panoramas is great. If you've taken a lot of panoramas, you have the option of doing that. If we come down here, we can see the panorama gallery. It really is just having a full gallery of panoramas. It's nothing, I would say, groundbreaking, but you know, if you have a presentation of panoramas, you have a nice gallery where they all live. It's good. And then finally, this is going to be, I would say, the most underrated and maybe most understood update of them all, which is now supporting for NVIDIA's DLSS, which is deep learning super sampling. And you know, that sounds like some woo high cloud kind of level of computing, and really it is, because it does involve AI. It's basically allowing AI to work in a certain way to boost the performance passively without actually drawing extra power, requiring extra hardware from you. If you do have specific NVIDIA cards. And I know this works with the latest 3000 cards. I believe it does also work with the 2000 card, because the 2000 cards are also ray tracing capable. And so this is stressing ray tracing. If you are familiar with ray tracing, it is more of the real-time rendering, high quality, in like immediate feedback kind of rendering. And so that's exactly what this is. And so this is something that's built in, which, and if we read here, like it increases the frame rates, but still generates those sharp frames, which is kind of the point here. We want to be able to keep the quality and move faster, move smoother, and have the experience overall look better because the quality is there and we can see things very smoothly. So that's going to round it out for Enscape 3.1. We have looked at the Enscape material library, which I am excited about. I have my own thoughts about Enscape in general because everything ends up in Revit, but nonetheless, the option of having these materials brought in from a pre-built library and then just simply replacing materials that you have already in your model, it makes so much sense to do that. And it's something you're going to have to do anyway. You have to apply materials in Revit to get things to show up right. So why not just pull them from an Enscape material library, replace them, and then be done? You know, edit them as you need to with the Enscape material editor, because it's really nice too. It makes things a lot easier. So again, that will do it for Enscape 3.1. I'm very excited from a Revit perspective. Let me know what you think from a Revit perspective especially, but also SketchUp and Rhino, all those other places, all those other models that use Enscape. I'm really curious what you might think of the update. Maybe because you've had the Enscape material editor, you're kind of, it doesn't matter, but for Revit, it's pretty big. So again, that will do it. If you happen to learn something, which you must have, I hope you did, please demolish that like button. Really helps me out a lot. That will do it. I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day, and thank you very much for watching.